Whether your beer is in a bottle, can, or glass, kick back and relax. It's better on draft.
Welcome, everybody. This is episode 291 of the Better on Draft podcast. My name is Ken. Thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it. We had a great interview earlier tonight with Big Lake Brewing, and we are going to do a second interview tonight. This show will come out on Monday, the 13th, I believe. So if you're listening live, obviously you have to wait until Monday for the podcast. If you're listening on the podcast, folks, head on over to our YouTube page. You can actually check out the video. And if you're watching the video, head on over to our podcast and listen to it on the podcast. Once again, my name is Ken. I have two beers, compliments of Rob, who was on a trip over to Portland. That is the West Coast Portland. And I've got and Linus over at Three Gatos helped me pronounce this. It is a Iran. You have to roll the R, as he says. And then he didn't help me with this one, but I believe this is a Lirige. L-L-E-R-I-G-E. Lirige, we'll go with. I'm sure someone will correct me in the iTunes comments as they leave a 1-star review. But speaking of 1-star reviews, my co-host Dan, what do you got over there?
I knew you were coming to me as soon as you said 1-star review. God damn. Well, because of our guest tonight, I got a few things going on. I've got my Orange Blossom Mead that I started about 6 months ago that's currently in the works. I've got my Porter that I made about a year ago. And I've got this bad boy. It's one of my bourbon barrel-aged stouts. It's been sitting for about 2 years now.
All right, and next to you on the video, we got Wendy. Wendy, what do you got to drink?
Well, I am finishing up our Fudgy Kruger Oatmeal Stout from the last interview from Big Lake Brewing. And I also have a Wax Wings Condor Valley Brunch, which is amazing.
Nicholas, how about you?
I am finishing up the Exploratory IPA Series Volume 2 from Big Lake, and we'll be transitioning full-time over to the Mango Habanero Haze, also from
Good choice.
Big Lake Brewing.
And Robert, what do you got?
Right now I have got, I have another non-alcoholic wit beer, the Witch Peak, from Athletic. And, since our guest is in Colorado, I have a Funkyo Couch from Wiley Roots.
And our guest in our live Zoom studio tonight, Julia Herz of the American Homebrewers Association. Welcome. What are you drinking?
Hi, everyone. I've got from my friend Jeremy Storton, who does Good Beer Matters, another podcast out there. St. Orton's Brew House is his home brewery. He sent me his Roja Rosemary Orange Honey Ale, and I have yet to crack it. It's 5%, and I'm gonna crack it and give it a go.
That's what we should have did. We should have blasted you with all of our home brews and had you judge it live on the air.
Well, yeah, I could do that. Send me beer.
Send you is that why you got into beer, just so people would just send you beer?
That's why I do this.
Aren't we all doing this because we like to drink beer and enjoy it,
True story.
and brew it and talk about it, right?
I can't deny it, but as a tech geek, the first question that I want to ask you and the first question that I want to get into, what was your indoctrination into craft beer, and how did it go from drinking craft beer to creating craftbeer.com?
Sure. And first of all, I'm Julia Herz, Executive Director of the American Homebrewers Association. Thank you all for sharing your Friday or after with us in this June summer night. The question triggers my history and my dad's influence. He always had specialty imports in the fridge. My brother's history and influence had him always collecting beer cans. And then my family's history and influence had us going to a place called the Brickskeller in Washington, D.C., which is no longer, but it had 500 different beers on the menu, and none of them were draft. It was bottles and cans. So from a very early age, I was thinking about beer and many different kinds of styles, many different kinds of labels, coming from many different areas of the world. Many different colors, right? And so I think that planted a seed in my head. And then it got me to think I wanted to homebrew literally when I became of age in 2020, when I was 21. So there's the homebrewing piece. You kind of talked about craft beer. And craft beer wasn't around then, right? Craft beer and independent craft beer is more of an evolution of what we saw in the US grow up from brew pub to then microbrewery to then craft brewery. And so that was a later part of the game where my mind started to say, I want to support the mom and pops. And you asked about craftbeer.com, it's an amazing website that I was helped create and publisher of starting in 2009. It's still published today. Go check it out, an incredible body of work. And I think all the learnings, because when I and you and us were getting to know craft beer in the early days, a lot of the education wasn't there. And so a lot of that actually trickled out and ended up on the craftbeer.com website and homebrewersassociation.org website that's been around for many, many years as well.
Now, sorry, Dan, you're not.
Go ahead.
Not you yet. You're next, I promise.
All right.
Now, in your repertoire, your LinkedIn page, it says that you are a beer educator. Explain to us a little bit more about what your role is as a beer educator, whether it's current in your role in the AHA, previously in your role at the BA, or your roles prior to that.
Sure. I think if you work in beer, you're educating in beer. I take it a step further where to do my job right now, to educate people on homebrewing. I educate people not just on the hobby of it, but the enjoyment of beer and why homebrewing is such a valuable, passionate hobby that many people do. Millions of people homebrew. So I educate through the form of writing, presenting. I've authored books. I co-authored Beer Pairing. I've co-authored craftbeer.com's Beer and Food course. I write an article or a column, for Zymergy magazine. So if you're a member of the American Homebrewers Association, you get one of the most prolific publications out there that's been published since 1978, and I now write for it. There's a lot of ways to educate, and every single day I'm busy talking about the process of brewing, the approach to brewing, as well as the sensory reward and enjoyment, and also the community connection from brewing.
You mentioned Zymergy, the magazine. My question is, being in Michigan, 4 out of the 5 of us, Dan is originally from Michigan, so he is included too. Zymergy has rated Bell's Two Hearted as the best beer out there for 4 years, I think, in a row. What makes, in your opinion, because obviously you're an educator, in your opinion, what makes Bell's Two Hearted such the well-rounded, consistent craft beer of the year?
It's interesting because you see a lot of best beers lists. There's a lot of information out there from a lot of knowledgeable people in beverage alcohol. But I'm going to put Zymergy magazine's, best beers list as one of those most reliable sources from people that are in tune and in touch. And for many years, it was Pliny the Elder that was the top beer chosen. And then Bell's Two Hearted certainly took the throne, and you mentioned for multiple years now. And I'm not here to speak for one beer or another. When you aggregate, survey data, and you have one group gravitating, you have this kind of, tipping point. It shows that something is top quality, reliable, and firing in all cylinders in terms of, the reward of balance of malt to hops, right? Ethanol or alcohol to carbonation. That beer is traditionally known for Centennial hops. It's not quite a smash beer, right? Single malt, single hops, but it's very little malted barley. I believe only 2 or 3, and then truly a centric beer to one hop, Centennial. So maybe one reason why it's doing so well is simply because it's so reliable, and it doesn't overcomplicate something. And it's really hard to find a consistent day in and day out IPA that quenches, that's not too sweet, right? That doesn't have too much residual sugar. And I happen to think it and many of the other beers that are rated towards the top of the list are truly marks of quality and reliability for sure.
Awesome. I would just, because you said that, big shout out to Mango Habanero Haze from Big Lake. When you talk about an IPA that's not too sweet, that really does. I hate IPAs, but I could drink a case of that easily, probably in about 24 hours. But let's talk homebrewing. I mean, you're something you've done for a while, but I know a lot of people haven't. A lot of people haven't had a lot of time, if they have, to really get into it. Talk to us like we're laymen for this. Why should we ever consider homebrewing?
I love it, Dan, and kudos to you. And I'm to take it that some of you homebrew. I mean, that's a given, right?
I mean, yeah, I got a couple, right?
I know, Dan, you led with, and you owed to the mead side. So, why homebrew is an easy one. We don't just if you're ahead of the game and you're not living hand to mouth, right? You're not eating food for survival and drinking beverage for thirst. You can treat it as a part of the gastronomic world, right? The food arts world. And so when people cook at home, they try to get better at it. And when people drink beer at home, or kombucha, or sake, or mead, or cider, well, many millions start to say, I want to try this too. And so to me, the reward of homebrewing is the multitude of things that all fire together as a home run. One of them is process. It's very rewarding to me to go out and seek a recipe, right? Somebody tips me off on a recipe. I respect that person. Great. I'm going to go brew that. Or I read a clone recipe. We publish many on homebrewersassociation.org. And I want to try to brew that beer at home, that commercial beer. Or a gold medal winner from a competition. We have National Homebrew Competition coming up in Pittsburgh in June, June 23rd to 25th. I want to try to brew those past gold medal winner beers because I want something that I created too. And then it's not just the day of getting the recipe and then going to get your ingredients or getting them shipped to you, but it's the carboy's always fermenting and bubbling away in the corner of my house, right? It's got my favorite t-shirt on it. It can hear the music I play. I can talk to it. I can actually smell it if I put my nose up to the airlock, right? I've got that whole experience with that beer from brewing process and conception all the way to packaging it. And then once I package it, and if you homebrew, you get this, then I don't just have a finished product for myself to try, but I make other people's day. It's like a smile in a bottle or a can, or a growler or a keg. I can bring people my homebrew clubs. Hey, what do y'all think about this? Enter it in BJCP competitions. Enter it in other family, down the street having a potluck and we're going to pair wine and beer. I bring that instead of a commercial beer. And so the reward goes far. And then the social impact really does go further when someone's maybe not having a good day. Somebody passed away, or they're having a great day. Somebody had a baby. When I hand them my homebrew, it's something from me to them that has true meaning, and it brings me closer to them, and it expands my community every time I brew.
That was a great answer. Now I'm curious, just talking about this, what was the first homebrew you did on your own, and how did it go?
Sure, Scottish ale. I made it in my 20s and we had a kit. So if you haven't homebrewed, you can homebrew very easily. If you can make soup, you can make beer. You can also make it much more complicated, like you're setting out to make a souffle, right? This was a Scottish ale extract kit. There were no grains in it. Now I definitely do both kits for extract or all grain brewing. And it was super magic. Like me and my friend Charlie Gunn brewed it on the stovetop. We packaged it and had a party. Our friends could not believe that it was actually carbonated. They tasted it. We tasted it. We killed the whole 2 cases. It was a 5-gallon batch, the first time we brewed it. And as soon as I did that, I was hooked and wanted to get better and better at it ever since.
Great choice of beers. That's something I still haven't done after all these years as a Scottish ale. But you mentioned, you were doing extract and you still do both these days. I see a lot. I like to think of them as elitists that don't like when people brew with extract. I personally typically go towards brew in a bag just because I'm in a condo and prefer to go all grain. But is there a stigma? Is that just something people are over, exaggerating when it comes to using LME, DME, anything like that? Is it something people should not do, or what are your feelings in general about that, I guess, is the whole question.
So pretty neat question to trigger some of the philosophy going on 2022 on the national level behind homebrewing. Homebrewing's had an incredible journey where I truly can say factually that it helped inspire and create the entire craft beer movement in the US and now globally, right? And so that, though, was circa 2022. In this era, I look at homebrewing as an amazing hobby, and there are some bias and stigma attached to it. But yet, if you're going to cook me a meal and I come to your house and it's spaghetti and you actually say, yeah, I got this jar, it's this jar of spaghetti, how dare I ever ridicule you? So, 2022 beyond, homebrewers, we have 37,000 members at the American Homebrewers Association. I hope y'all join us. It pays for itself, less than $50 to get Zymergy magazine, 2,000 plus member deals, all the access to the stuff on homebrewersassociation.org, pre-sale tickets to Great American Beer Festival. The list goes on. And what I want people to do when they homebrew is feel welcome no matter where they go. And so if I walk into a homebrew club and I say it's an extract beer, I would hope that homebrew club, if I'm still 3 years later a member of that homebrew club brewing extract, all they should care about is what's in the glass and how it tastes. And so, yes, I definitely think that stigma happens in many nooks and crannies, but it seems a little odd to me that it happens in homebrewing when it's not happening in other areas of culinary. All that really matters is what the end product is and what you produce.
Great answer. I do love that. And I feel the same way. I want to switch. I don't want to take up all the time because I could talk to you about this for the entire show and everyone will just get mad at me. But let's switch back to the mead because you did mention that. I kind of brushed it off for a minute there, but you were also the first employee of Redstone Meadery. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you've brewed beer. We just talked about that. Have you made mead while you're an employee, before you're an employee, or after Redstone?
So absolutely mead, if you're into, fermenting, it should be on the list. Mead is honey wine, fermented honey, arguably one of the world's oldest, if not first, beverages. And before I was even at Redstone, I created a website, honeywine.com. So you brought up, Ken, craftbeer.com. And, I had honeywine.com in the early days, in the 90s, when mead was starting to make a play to grow up as a beverage category that was going to rise on the scene. So I think that, I've got a good history in mead. I've made plenty of them. I've got award-winning meads from BJCP competitions, the Mazer Cup, and the like. My blueberry mead's been very successful and prolific. My mixed berry mead has been very successful. I won gold at international mead competition for my dry traditional mead, which is a really hard mead to make because when it's drier, there's really nothing to hide. When it's traditional, that means there's no fruit, herbs, or spices. It's just fermented honey. I got mead game, Dan. We could talk all day, and I certainly enjoy it as a beverage. And
go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, all good. I love tasting and talking meads. It's a very, very delicate, fermentable honey. It's like white paint. As soon as you drop something else in it, it's totally influenced. It's very easy to influence honey, but what an incredible backdrop of a fermentable it is.
Yep, I agree with you. This is just a traditional orange blossom I'm working on. It's my first mead ever. About 6 months old right now, so still got a little ways to go. But Wendy, I believe you had a question.
Oh, I have a ton of questions. So you have a very impressive resume. And one of the things that I'm curious about is how did you decide which direction you wanted to go in this industry?
So when you say industry, you kind of mean the beer biz. And hello, Wendy. Cheers to you, by the way. I think all of us in our journey follow what's in front of us. And sometimes we pay attention to the signs and organically float along. Other times we just go after it. What we all end up doing personally and professionally often has sometimes to just do with timing and luck. So to me, conscious decision was, really just wanting to work in the beverage of beer. I am a broadcast journalism major. I worked at CNN Washington, D.C. Bureau right after college. And then when I left CNN, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I went on a cross-country trip. And on that trip, I volunteered at the Great American Beer Festival, which the Brewers Association puts on. And it was in Colorado. And then after that trip, I ended up moving to Colorado. And so I always had, right, like the festival environment for beer and the association on my mind. So I decided I wanted to work in beer on that cross-country trip. And then any opportunity to do that, I started to talk to people about it. And so I had a chance to get my feet wet at the association in the earlier days. And so I went for it just based on geography. And then to me, there was no turning back, where I see on a national level, even global level, what homebrewersassociation.org has done for homebrewing, what brewersassociation.org has done for, craft beers. And so I was fortunate enough to be able to be in the same location that the national associations were growing and evolving in. Out my window right now, if you're watching us, not looking, about 10 minutes out that window, 20 minutes out that window is Boulder, Colorado. And that's where the AHA and the Brewers Association are physically located.
So is there an accomplishment that you are most proud of? And before I even finish that, I have to say, I was reading an article and they listed like all the stuff that you did when you were with the Brewers Associations, things that they're accrediting to you. And it's things like the independent craft label. Like there's some pretty big campaigns that they're attributing to you. Is there something that you have done throughout your career that you're most proud of?
Love the question. And yes, I'm pleased and proud with my body of work that continues to grow today. We're all works in progress. So don't cap it off yet. There's more to come.
Right.
One of the most in my back pocket, but still out in the space, and you do bring it up, is helping support and making awareness, putting on the map independent craft brewers. And so in 2007, there was an opportunity for me to work back at the Brewers Association as craft beer program director. And so anything I did was the result of many people doing it. But my job certainly was to grow awareness and demand for small and independent craft beer. And in 2007, no one was talking independent craft beer, right? And so when the Independent Craft Brewer Seal came out, which is what you brought up, Wendy, that's that upside down beer bottle that you see on so many craft beers. That was 2017, and I was one of the lead architects behind that. I'm very proud to have been at the place and the convergence in time where the National Association said, we are here to advocate, promote, and protect small and independent craft brewers. So what are we going to do next? And with the course of many people weighing in, we did put into place the Independent Craft Brewer Seal. And so I'm very proud of that. And I think that will have, generational help for mom and pop businesses that are fighting in a very tough market, especially since this concept of craft has gotten co-opted. And the notion of making craft beer now isn't really always going to go hand in hand with independent businesses, but that's exactly who started the notion of craft beer.
That's amazing. So, as a woman, I have not done my own homebrewing yet. I've thought about it, kind of played with the idea a little bit. Hasn't been my next step yet, but I have a lot of friends. I'm very lucky to be in an area where there is a lot of women-oriented groups based in beer. So I have been able to take part in a bunch of different homebrewing things. And what do you suggest for women who would like to start out homebrewing? Like, do you have somewhere that they should go? Is there people they should talk to? What do you recommend for people to do that?
So I love it. It's interesting, Wendy, the times you and I are in, and thank you to our gentlemen listening and the co-host here, allowing us to talk about the notion of sometimes being a woman in beer there's a different slant or perception, but that you also slipped in people into your question. So my answer back is no matter where you identify gender-wise, anyone can brew. So take the gender out of it. but yet to acknowledge that you are saying that many women often feel intimidated or based on circumstance, a little muscled out or mansplained, and that, we want anyone brewing, and that's part of the era of 2022 and forward for home brewing, who have very prolific, amazing, mentor group of men that are the majority of who brew. The women factor, which is, give or take 10% based on the data that I've seen from our AHA membership and other data, it needs to grow. That's very disproportional. We need more women brewing beer. And so the safest way to feel comfortable is up to each individual. But homebrew clubs, there's 2,200 of them. Homebrewersassociation.org has the most prolific database of homebrew shops and homebrew clubs. So you can look up your local homebrew club and stop into one of those homebrew clubs, go to a meeting, test it out, and have them guide you along. Or you go to one of your local shops and say, I'm a beginning brewer. I want to brew with people, or I want to brew on my own. What exactly do I need? And often you have most everything you need already in your kitchen, minus, a few small things that the shop might recommend and the ingredients for whatever beer. We on homebrewersassociation.org have how-to videos. The Easy Amber Ale is an amazing, just really approachable beer. There's a lot more going on in amber ales than people might realize. So we recommend an amber ale as a way to start homebrewing. 5-gallon batches are common. You can even make 1-gallon batches these days. I've done that recently. It fermented in a 1-gallon jug. They shipped it to me. I had everything in the box. So from unpacking that box, I was ready to brew. And so I would say, no matter the gender, do your approach that makes you feel comfortable, but seek out the experts or the authorities around you on the club level or the shop level. And then go online too to ask questions as you brew your beer, taste your beer, because we have, for example, 100,000 plus people are on American Homebrewers Association forum. People are online forums in many, many places, and you can ask questions in a safe environment there. So you are less intimidated and can just toss out those like, hey, it might sound rudimentary to you, but I'm stuck. Can you help me?
Nick, I think you had a question.
Yeah, I want to kind of keep essential theme going here. And I really got to give Rob for kudos for this one, because this was definitely his idea for asking this question. So Julie, you have been an unwavering advocate for expanding the beer community, trying to make it all inclusive, so that way everyone can enjoy what's being put out there, whether it's homebrew, whether it's out there in industry, etc. In the wake of sexual harassment and assaults, and probably being more brought up in news and whatnot, probably more so than ever, and a lack of racial diversity that we continue to see, what steps are being taken to show equity and equality in craft beer, at least from the Homebrewers Association perspective? And and to kind of add to this, to add a second part to this, what do you think the industry itself should really be doing to kind of make sure that beer is for all, not for just select folks?
Right. And you, lot to unpack there, my friend. You you come out swinging on a great question.
I can tell you, I ask a lot of loaded questions. Sometimes they're run-on sentences. So, and
in me saying that, I'm not meaning to jest in a negative way at all. I'm complimenting you on a lot to unpack, because these are the times we're in. And the beverage of beer, based on advertising, historic marketing, it was marketed to legal drinking adult males, 21 to 35. So the beverage of beer, compared to, say, the beverage of wine, has already, out of the gates, at least in the U.S., historically been more male than female. And so what you kind of get at is what's going on the national level. And there's a tremendous amount going on. You've got a growing group of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion professionals or wannabe helpers and advocates that are in the space. For example, on the homebrewing side for the AHA, American Homebrewers Association, I lead with saying we want to make homebrewing accessible to all. When I say accessible to all, it means we take the intimidation factor out of it, just like Wendy was bringing up, right? Because any new hobby can be intimidating. If I want to paraglide, if I want to build birdhouses, whatever, how do I start? How do I do it? And so anyone that's guiding me and educating me, I don't want to be profiled of, you don't look like a birder, so I'm not going to guide you when I walk into that, shop. Or the paragliding community. I would hope they don't look at me as anything but an aspiring individual, be part of that community. So from leadership now, obviously on the homebrewer side, we're leading with that notion of making homebrewers accessible to all. We will soon have an Art of Inclusive Communication webinar for all AHA members coming up in 2022. And inclusive communication really, lexicon and the way we talk to each other, I think is a really big deal. And so we're doing resources to membership one by one that over time will grow that body of work to say, yep, we're late to the party, but hey, our foot's in the door. We are in the game to win it. We know it takes decades or generations to really create cultural shift, change cultural norms. But I'm here to say, as a woman in beer, that beer should not be stigmatized as for one specific gender. And then there's a lot more that I could answer on tactics on the professional side for craft brewers from Brewers Association. There's incredible work going on from the perspective of committees and membership, rolling up their sleeves, both on the professional side and the homebrewing side, putting in time and the work to build resources to showcase to people in beer that are the stakeholders in the industry, the producers, here's how you become more inclusive. You brought up not just equity, right, but equality. They're different. Here's how you can be aware of what the difference is. And here's how you can have your work and conscious effort in this space trickle out to make it a more inclusive community.
Right. Well, I was not expecting an answer, that well thought, articulate answer. Preach on. That is why I love this show, guys.
It was a tough one. Not what one
that is. Well, no, I think if you listen to some of the earlier episodes of this show, it was just me, Ken, and Dan just getting drunk for 2 hours.
I was going to say, I don't suggest listening to some of these.
Yeah, I don't
do it. It's a lot. It's a good time. I'm usually saying racist things. And
you weren't, Dan.
Get out of here.
But Rob was there. So
yeah, but I think but as we've kind of morphed into what we are today. And personally, I think the pandemic has been a blessing in disguise for this particular show, where we can branch out from the state of Michigan and get people from, breweries from outside of the state of Michigan, and people such as yourself, not just so much on the brewery side, but homebrewers, associations, etc. That's why I think that's one of the reasons why we keep doing this, because there's more to the story than just someone wanting to start a brewery in their basement and then thinking, oh, I'm going to make this a business. I think there's more to, I know Ken's laughing, but there's more to it than just that. And I think that's one of the reasons why we've morphed over the last several years into having these conversations. Because let's face it, those are the conversations that we need to have. And yeah, they're tough. I know people it might make them uncomfortable, but this is our show. And we can do, and Ken will say this, we can do whatever we want on this show. And I think we need to have these kinds of conversations. And I think
and I would add to you what you're sharing. I'm talking to a lot of homebrew clubs, a lot of homebrew shops. And one of the number one things that the homebrew clubs are asking me is, how can we be more inclusive? How can we recruit a more diverse group of participants and members? So what you're saying is in concert with the times, right? It is unfortunately, the world's really not changing fast enough. If you come from a marginalized population, if you happen to be, woman identified, not male, If you are, an example of diversity in whatever fashion, you still have a pretty dang hard time of it in certain situations. Mm-hmm. But the beauty is that what you emulate and what you share with us is that these conversations now are going on, and it won't change unless we're all not scared to talk about it and okay to raise our hand and say, I need help in this arena to be more inclusive. Or here's an example of where I feel like I was, cast bias or excluded, or even worse, exposed to harassment or assault. What do I do? These conversations are going on. It's okay. And we need to support each other. We also need the ability to report outside. Third-party reporting is very important for companies and organizations to have in place, because then it makes it a little bit more anonymous when things get real and serious, and people need that anonymity to actually address the issue.
Right. Ken, you want to say something?
I wanted to cut in real quick because I think, one, it's an important conversation, and not to plug an upcoming show, but obviously that's just what I'm going to do here. On June 17th, as we celebrate Juneteenth, the national holiday in the United States, we're actually having the Drinking While Black panel, a repeat of what we did last year, this time hosted by Aaron Jose, who created the documentary One Pint at a Time, who we had on our show, as well as Robert, bringing in a handful of black beer drinkers in the industry, talking about their experiences. Now, if I were wearing a flannel, I'd basically be, if you ask someone what is a craft brewer, beard, maybe bald, flannel, white, like I am the look of that. When you're discussing homebrewers associations and you're trying to bring in not necessarily like you're attempting to diversify, to understand that, hey, we want to be inclusive. We want to bring everyone in. We want to bring you in if you're black, white, person of color, indigenous, female, male, like we want to bring everyone in. But my question to you is that as an educator, as someone who is so intelligent with beer, how do these local brewers guilds, like we've got the Coonan Brewers Guild, the Ann Arbor Brewers Guild, how do we bring in a more diverse group and attract them to our group?
To your group of homebrewers, to your group of beer enthusiasts?
Yeah, both. Just to beer drinkers, beer brewers, beer fans.
It has to go across the DNA of everything you do, from the imagery on your website to the nomenclature and lexicon that you use. Inclusive language needs to be conscious, to how you treat people as soon as they walk in the door the first time, so they come back 10 times more, to reaching out to groups that are not already who you're interfacing with. Go to the local universities, go to the local community colleges, seek out the clubs that are already grouped up because they're part of a population that needed to group up to feel safe and actually have comfort conversing with each other. And use the topic of brewing and beer appreciation, because a lot of groups today maybe aren't homebrewing. They're more, social drinking clubs, and that's good. That's okay. You all are a social drinking club. Wendy raises her hand, right? And you're doing an example of having that June 17th show. You use your platform to go after people that you would not naturally gravitate to, and you say, we know beer. We know brewing. We want a mentor. It means something to us to expand our community. How can we get you involved? Do you have any people that are interested in brewing? These are the things that we do to, keep our group aware of conduct, right? Establish a code of conduct for your group or your business or your club, right? There's all these little things, but it has to be deliberate day in and day out. And then you have to admit privilege. I have privilege. I'm a white identified female. I did not graduate with student debt. I have lots of things that, no matter how hard my life is based on disabilities that I have, on the executive function disability with dyslexia, ADHD, I'm still never going to have as hard of a time as many others that are out there from marginalized populations. So admitting your privilege, going after people that you normally wouldn't interface. It takes conscious effort and then keeping at it, even when those people say no, thank you. Because if you can bring them to beer, because many people like beer, and use that as the bridge point, right? Beer is a connection point in the glass. Eventually you could win them over if you really mean it and you really back it up.
I think one of the important things you mentioned is for these groups to take initiative. A lot of these groups exist within the confines of their brewery, their group, their Facebook page, whatever. But to take the initiative to be more inclusive, to be more welcoming, to be more understanding, because sure, they may feel like they are inclusive while they're at the brewery, because they would tell anyone who ever walked up to them while they're doing a bottle share, hey, come on, try a beer, to go a little bit further. And you mentioned a few good things, joining local groups, the local universities, because a lot of those kids are over 21, and bringing in these groups of people, whether they are, not minority based groups within the craft beer world, bringing them in and inviting them in. We've talked a lot. I know Rob wants to talk to you, so I'm just going to pass it over to Rob here, because I know Rob has some questions for you, as long as he's not dying from the pollen.
Let's go, Robert. What do you got?
Well, I guess the first thing I would like to say that it's good that I don't have to even go into the questions because of how great my allies on this show are, that I don't even have to start asking that, because I know that as my allies that they have my back, and as one of the Black craft beer drinkers that are here in Detroit and in the surrounding area, that there's not a lot of us. There's not a lot of Black craft beer craft brewery owners. I think the stat was that like 93.5% of the breweries are white owned. So we don't have a whole lot of space. So it is one thing that I can hope that while the steps are being made, that I wish the steps were bigger, and I wish the steps were moving faster. But we can only go as fast as it will take us, and I would rather it continue to go forward than have any motion where it goes backwards. So I am definitely like I said, it's not as satisfactory as I would like, but it's still going forward. So that's one thing I'm glad for, and I'm glad for the team here. Now I actually kind of wanted to, since my white brethren have taken care of the question, I want to go back to some home brewing.
Right.
Now I haven't, obviously we was brought up here, but unfortunately I have not homebrewed in quite some time. I think it was probably the last time was in 2016. And I mean, I do miss it, but when you have a family and 3 kids and an electric stove, it does make brewing time a bit difficult. I'm curious, how do you fit home brewing with life as it goes on?
It's a fair question. I so feel for that. The catch is that an electric stove in your kitchen is a perfect place to homebrew. And you, like I said to Wendy, you probably already have the equipment you need to do it. So you want to think of reasons to brew, right? You have a family gathering coming up, and instead of bringing that lasagna that's going to take you 3 hours, you brew that's going to take you 3 hours, right? Other reasons to brew. We give you at the American Homebrewers Association reason to brew all year long. We just hosted Big Brew that had, almost 900 people participated from multiple countries across the world. So you get a date on your calendar and you say, this is a homebrew holiday, right? We've got Meat Day coming up in August. We've got Learn to Homebrew Day coming up early November. So reasons to brew, whether it's a family gathering or somebody's birthday, I want to do something special for somebody else. Sometimes that's a easier reason for us to carve out our time because we're all such givers to everyone else besides ourselves. But the catch is, Rob, that you're going to have a beer for you no matter the reason for somebody else that you thought of brewing it. So I would say life gets busy. We prioritize what matters to us. And if you can just carve out 3 or 4 times a year being, that brew day, then you're a home brewer. So I would say put it on the calendar, find a reason to brew, and you're going to be psyched you did. And it's not as long as you think once you commit and get your recipe and ingredients going.
And there is one thing that I do want to brew. I had this idea that I wanted to make a beer in honor of my mom. My mom had passed away back in 2018, and one of the things that she really liked out here, there was a bakery that made a lemon bar with blueberries. And so I had this idea where I wanted to make a beer that kind of emulated that flavor, that would have, that tart lemon with a hint of blueberry and a nice kind of, just, I don't want to say a finish, but at least like some sort of shortbread kind of flavoring to go with it. I wasn't sure what style I would make that. I wasn't sure if that should be a blonde or if that should be like a wheat. I guess, and I guess being someone who is always looking at food pairings, I guess that's probably the person to ask this question. Like with that profile, with say like heavy on lemon, blueberry, shortbread, what kind of style do you think that should be?
So I love what you are saying, because you're already constructing a recipe that would really mean something to you and you want to do it right and with care and attention. B, even if my answer doesn't satisfy you, that's why I would go on the AHA forum and say, my mom passed away this year. I want to honor her with this. She really loved this type of food, and any advice on constructing a recipe. And people are going to jump on that because we all want to share our hobby with each other and we want more people brewing. So back to my answer to the question, and I think you're smart, start with the base style and then you sneak in the lemon, right? And you try to emulate that shortbread essence and blueberry. I would say that as you were talking, I was thinking about a wheat-based ale, right? Maybe a Berliner Weiss or a Goza that has already some kind of snap of tart and a little bit sour in it would be the base. Wheat malt tends to be very pillowy, a little bit more bread-like. You take a piece of bread out of the bag and you pinch the middle of it. That's wheat malt flavor, right? It's not the edge of the bread that's been exposed to the baking that gets a little bit more like pale malt or Vienna Munich malt. That's that flavor of shortbread to me. But shortbread, you want it light and pillowy. So I would have it be a wheat, really heavy on the wheat, and then go from there.
Okay. And I guess that leads me to my last one here, in that one of the reasons why I haven't brewed in a while is because my last 2 batches basically turned to the dark side. That's mainly because I didn't know the science. I tried to do a barrel aged flavored Oreo cookie stout, and didn't know that I wasn't supposed to put the Oreos in while it was fermenting, and just kind of doing just silly things that obviously not knowing the science. I love to take classes, but time and money aren't there. And then along with the worry that another 4 weeks of brew will taste like basically a used wet Planet Fitness sock. How do you combat like a bad brew? Like, what do you say to a person who has a bad brew and says, well, I suck at this. This takes too long to make. Why should I bother trying to do this again?
Such a setup for an easy answer, Rob. You follow a recipe. If you follow a recipe, that comes from somebody that's tried and tested the type of beer that you want to brew. And so back to the online forums or websites like homebrewersassociation.org, you can find mostly what you need. I will say that what you just described is one of the more advanced complex beers I frankly have heard about in a while. Barrel aged, Oreo cookie, whatever else you said, like, come on, be kind to yourself. If you just set out like I brought up souffle earlier. I'm not a chef. I don't know how to make a souffle. Am I going to make a souffle just from like my head? No, I'm going to pull out a book and look at the recipe and the steps in the process for a souffle. So I would say go for anything you want based on recipes that you've seen, or if you want to construct something like the shortbread beer, ask people that brew that kind of stuff all the time, and they can help you formulate the process and steps so you do it right from out of the gates.
Gotcha. And as it's funny because being one who does bake, that is one of the things that I do is follow the recipe. So it's I don't know. I guess I didn't want to go with the souffle metaphor, but it is kind of deflating when a beer decides to just kind of go the wrong way.
Yeah, it is. It's frustrating. It's expensive. But the smaller batches, the average home brewer that's more advanced is brewing 5 gallons. That's confirmed. But the smaller batches, it's less risk. So I encourage people to brew that 1 gallon test batch. If you're a commercial brewery and you have a pilot brewery, that's a smaller batch for your bigger eventual production. It's the same thing at home. If you're a home brewer, your pilot brewery can be those 1 and 3 gallon batches. So get your setup for that. And then when you really love the recipe, then you brew 5 or 10 gallons.
Gotcha. Well, that's going to be the step then.
Right on. I wish you luck.
Rob, I appreciate the souffle deflate analogy. I heard it. I'm there for you, and I appreciate it. Folks, that's going to do it. We have our final questions before we say goodbye to Ms. Julia Herz. We're going to start, however, with Nicholas. Nicholas, what is your final question for Julia Herz?
So you're in Colorado. We got the weekend coming up. It's not a holiday weekend, but it's still a weekend. What's in your fridge that you're going to be indulging in this weekend? If there's any events, or it's just chill at home kind of thing. What are you indulging in beer wise this weekend? Homebrew or from a local brewery nearby?
Sure. I'm presenting tomorrow at the Brew Hut in Aurora, which is tied to Dry Dock Brewing. If anybody's heard of Dry Dock out of Colorado. And I promised them that I would bring a Belgian triple because I'm doing sensory demonstration in person. I have brewed that several weeks ago, but I'm not quite sure it's carbonated enough yet. So I need to try that, crack a bottle. And if it's not carbonated enough, then I'm probably going to start dipping into some of my meads that are rather aged because I know they're reliable and I have them. I wanted to serve something I made instead of something that we bought. So those are what I got. So that's what I'll be tasting tonight to prep for tomorrow.
Really quickly, Dan, Ken, and I think Rob, do you guys remember Miso Ornery from
Oh, yeah. I was thinking about that beer the other day.
The Belgian quad.
Yeah.
Griffin Quad.
As soon as Julia said Belgian triple, I'm like, okay.
That popped in your head.
That popped in my head. It's a Belgian quad, but
not Final Absolution, the multi-medal award-winning Belgian triple here in Michigan.
I'm sorry.
I literally thought about this beer on Wednesday.
I'm sorry, Ken. Griffin Claw is just too near and dear to my heart. I'm sorry.
Not Le Fin de Mon from Unibrew, the international triple standard.
Nope. You know what? I'll say this, and then we'll pass on to the next person. I don't drink Le Fin du Monde all that much. I'll say
drink some Miso Ornery.
I'll just drink Miso Ornery.
All right, we're talking over ourselves a little bit. Wendy, what's your final question?
So Ken's probably going to be mad because mine is not a quick question, but one of the other ventures that you have is that you are a founder of Gray for Good, which is something kind of near and dear to my heart. It's a plight that I am on right now as we speak. But talk to us about this cause and how people can donate.
I love it. Thank you, Wendy. Definite Passion Project is a global grassroots campaign. Grayforgood.com is the website. The tagline is Gray for Good for all womanhood. I grade, I saved, meaning I didn't color my hair, and I gave. What I found is that in the U.S., on average, $20 billion a year is spent on women coloring our gray hair. That number is just staggering compared to what men would maybe consider coloring their gray hair. So where, why, what's up with us? Why, as we come of age and get better and more mature, smart and wise and accomplished, do we then start to feel diminished because our hair is going gray and that it's like not a good thing in our tool belt? Long story short, I'd love to shift the $20 billion from women coloring our gray to instead women and girls causes, because they are disproportionately funded. Only 1.9% of overall giving in the United States goes to women and girls causes. I can back that stat up. It's terrible. And the statistics saying it gives me chills. So the bottom line is, one day, as I grow this campaign, I will have a purpose-driven trust where people can contribute into it and decide which women and girls causes get those funds. But for now, I just love to see on social media, hashtag Gray for Good, pick a women and girls cause. There's 50,000 of them in the United States. Pink Boot Society is listed as one of them. And donate your savings or a portion of it from not coloring your gray to that cause. Go through the pain and anguish of going gray. I have fully done it, and I finally own it and feel comfortable in my own skin again. And support other women who go gray. And that's my advice. I'm grateful for you talking about it. I'm here for you, Wendy. If you ever want to chat offline about it on the journey, please give me a call.
I definitely will.
Speaking of going gray, Dan.
Yeah, so I've been gray since my early 30s. I just hide it well. But Julia, totally going to put you on the spot. And if you don't have an answer for this, that's okay. I do. But the Belmont Stakes are this weekend. Who are you picking to win?
Oh my gosh, Dan, if you have an answer, I want to hear your answer. I put that back to you.
All right. Yep. So Ken and Nick will get this, but we, the people, put your money on it. But don't blame us if they don't win.
Okay, Jake. Jake Hager.
I feel like last week I need to make sure to mention that this is not a financial advising podcast or financial advice.
If you bet on that for my advice, and it's a spoiler, but if you put your money on that and it isn't a spoiler, then I'm sorry.
No politics, no religion, no financial advising.
I feel
and
like
no gambling, apparently.
I was going to say, we might have to add, we did have a whole gambling episode.
We did.
Julia, do you have an answer? Do you just agree with Dan, we the people?
You know what? I'm going with Dan the man. I trust him because he homebrews.
That's one of the reasons why I don't trust him. But Rob, what's your final question?
All right, this one I feel like I have to adapt because lately, and pretty much the answer has always been the same. So, kind of a fill in the blank. You can always tell a brewery's quality by their lager, but you can also tell a brewery's quality by their what?
I mean, this makes assumptions my answer, but by their American India Pale Ale. If they're making an IPA, they better home run it. It's like walking into an Italian restaurant, and if I have spaghetti and meatballs and they were a little off, then they're not. Why are they Italian restaurant? You better make an amazing, if you have it on the menu, American IPA, or I don't know. So that's my answer.
There you go.
I think that's the first time we ever had someone say an IPA. For me, like, I'm not a big fan. Like, I love the malty beers, the biscuity beers. So give me something a little more dark, mild ESB. And I am a happy person. Julia, I appreciate you joining us. My final question is very simple, very easy. Why don't you give us a little plug? You guys have an upcoming festival at Philadelphia, I hear, in 2 weeks. Pittsburgh. Sorry. Pennsylvania. I don't want to mess that up. Don't want to confuse
Pittsburgh that, man.
with Pennsylvania. I know we...
Don't do that.
What is coming up for that festival? What should we expect? And who is it catered towards for the fans of the show that might want to know a little bit more about it?
Sure. Here's the deal. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, June 23rd to 25th is Homebrew Con. It's literally the world's largest gathering of homebrewers and the national conference. We've got 45 plus talks. We are at the same time judging and announcing the awards for the National Homebrew Competition. National Homebrew Competition's been going on, and this whole thing's 44 years strong. We got people coming in all over the world to Pittsburgh to gather and convene as homebrewers and be privy to, the talks from Keith Villa, who is authored the book on cannabis and brewing, and also is Syria Beverages. We've got Dr. Jackson, Dr. J, Nicole Beckham Jackson, who is day 2 keynote and talking about her journey on homebrewing because she's a homebrewer and an AHA member. The closing headline speaker is Bill Kovaleski of Victory Brewing, who has been an AHA member since his start, and all of the resources helped him get Victory Brewing going, which is now an amazing regional craft brewer. Homebrew Expo is where you can buy equipment. There's 40 plus sponsors. We have club night with 40 plus clubs personally serving to impress each other and all attendees. We've got brewery tours. So the list goes on and on. Homebrewcon.org is where to check it out, June 23rd to 25th. And I would say if you can't catch that, become an AHA member. Membership pays for itself. Homebrewersassociation.org. Join us. We'll give you reasons to brew. We'll give you resources to brew better beer. We'll help you pay for your membership and at tenfold and back. And you'll be part of an amazing community that rewards your home hobby and even in your career if you want.
Julia Herz, thank you so much for joining us on this episode 291 of the Better on Draft podcast. My name is Ken. For my co-hosts Rob, Nick, Wendy, and Dan, we appreciate you joining us. And no matter what you think of your beer, we think it's Better on Draft. Have a good night.
Timed that perfectly. Peace.